Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to sharpen and reduce noise in an image. Now, let me say right off the bat that this method that I'm going to demonstrate isn't unique to me. There are a lot of photographers that do it this way. I didn't invent it by no means. I actually started doing it maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and what prompted me to do it was I was looking at the portrait work of a photographer named Gregory Heisler. And Heisler often uses large format cameras to take his portraiture. These are 4x5 and 8x10 cameras. And what he would do is he takes advantage of the tilt shift lenses that are on those cameras so that he could have a very specific part of his portrait in focus. And quite often, the focus would fall off dramatically to the other parts of the image. And what he achieves by doing that is he really gets the viewer to look where he wants them to look, because our nature is that we'll look at something that is in focus and we'll look away from the parts that are out of focus. Well, with sharpening and noise reduction, and sharpening, obviously, you're going to sharpen a part and someone will hopefully look at that sharp part. But noise reduction, what it actually does to reduce noise, it kind of blurs the image a little bit. It kind of blends that noise and blurs it out. So you're actually softening the image. So you could use sharpening and noise reduction to kind of guide your viewer to look at a very specific part of the image, the part you want them to look at. Unfortunately, if you use the global adjustments that are found in the detail panel, you'll be sharpening every pixel. Almost. If you could use masking, you could mask out some of the more homogenous areas of your image. But by and large, you're sharpening pretty much everything. And with noise reduction, you're reducing noise everywhere. Well, what I found is that if I use a brush, I could very specifically sharpen where I want and very specifically reduce noise where I want. And what I found, and what you'll find, if you don't already know, obviously, when you look at an image, usually the noise is going to be in the most homogeneous part of the image, the background, the sky, something where tone and color are more or less very even, not a lot of detail there. And in the case of this gorilla, if I zoom in, you'll notice that the noise is very noticeable in the more homogeneous out of focus background. But the noise isn't really as noticeable on her face. So why reduce noise and soften all this detail when I really don't have to? So what I'll do is I'll zoom in like this, and I'll look at the image. And in the case of this image, when I look at it right on the background, I could see there's color noise. And if you're not familiar with color noise, it's little red, green, and blue dots. And you could see that there's quite a bit of color noise on this image. Unfortunately, a brush will not remove the color noise. So I have to globally remove the color noise. So I will go to the detail panel, and it's been my experience with this specific camera, this is an Nikon D500, that if I move this color slider somewhere between 15 and 25, that I'll almost always totally obliterate the color noise. So what I'll generally do is just kind of edge it up. And right there at 18, I could tell it took away the color noise. And I'll do a before after, and it takes a second for it to render. So there's before, let it render, there it rendered. You can see that color noise. Now I'll turn it back on, and there is after. So maybe there's just a touch still there. So I'm going to just inch that up a little more, like 22. There, it's definitely gone now. There is before, and there is after. So you could see it definitely removed the color noise. Hopefully that came through in the video. But it really left the actual noise. There's still luminance noise there. You could see that it looks like film grain. Well, to do this method of reducing noise and sharpening with the brush, what I recommend that you do, and what I do, is I zoom out. Now, typically, if you're going to do global noise reducing with the detail tab, I do recommend you stay zoomed in. You zoom in on a part where you want detail, and hopefully in that same zoomed in view, you have a part where you want to reduce noise. So you could really balance all these slider movements to get an optimum adjustment of detail on your image. But with the brush, I really recommend that you zoom out, and it's just more efficient this way. So now I'll open the brush tool, and if you have sliders moved, reset the sliders by double-clicking on the word effect. And when you do, you just reset the sliders. Now, what I usually do is I start out with reducing noise where I don't want the noise. And I'll have feathering, flow, and density all at 100. And for now, I'll have auto mask unchecked. Then I'll go down here to the noise slider and I'll just move it all the way right up. And I could readjust that. And I'll get a pretty big brush. And you can see I have a pretty large brush. And I'll just come in. And by the way, this image was shot at an ISO of 1800. So there is some noise. And I'll just come in and I'll stay away from the gorilla's face completely. So I'll just come in and I'm doing these little big broad strokes. And if I want to see the overlay, I could hit the O on the keyboard and it will give me that red overlay. You also could check this little box down here in the left-hand corner. So what I'll do then, I'll get a smaller brush and I'll come up here. Maybe I'll come over here in a second. Now what I'll do though is I'll turn on auto mask. And so for these adjustments that are close to the gorilla's face, what I want to make sure is that plus sign does not go over the gorilla at all. I want to make sure the plus sign stays outside of the gorilla. And usually it works pretty good. Sometimes it will encroach a little bit depending on how close in tone your background is to your subject. But usually you'll find that these little edges won't matter as much. So I'll come in and I've reduced noise now. Now I'll turn this overlay off by hitting the O key again on my keyboard to turn it off. Now I want to zoom back in just to look. So I have the brush open and it's in brush tool mode. But if I hold the space bar in, it'll turn into the magnifying glass and I could zoom in. And now you can see that it did a pretty good job. It reduced the noise quite a bit. If I turn the entire brush off, there's the noise, and turn it back on. There it is without noise. Now, if I feel that it didn't do a good enough job, and I'll zoom back out. I'm going to hold the space bar in again and click on this image again. I could come in and duplicate the brush. And I'm going to get rid of this info over here by hitting the I key on my keyboard. And if I want to duplicate the brush, the easiest way I think is just to right click right on the little button and click duplicate. And you could duplicate that brush and then come off it. And then you could zoom back in, hold the space bar in. So now we're kind of like got double the brush strokes on there. There's before and there's after. And you'll notice we didn't brush on the gorilla's face, so we didn't soften that at all. We just reduced the noise in the background. Now I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to hold the space bar in again and click on the image again. Now I want to selectively sharpen specific parts of the image. Now what I'm going to do is get a new brush. I'm going to click on new. I want to reset these sliders, so I'm going to double click on the word effect. And then I want to bring sharpness. And to start, I'll turn it all the way up. It probably won't stay there, but I'm going to put it there for now. And now I got to determine what do I want sharp? Well, I want her eyes. I want her face pretty much sharp, and I want her ear sharp. I really don't think, the dome of her head or back needs to be sharp, but down in here does. And I'll have auto mask off to begin with. All right, I might turn it on. So I'll come in here and I'll just paint in here. Now I'll turn the overlay on by hitting the O key again. It does help me see what I'm doing. All right, and again I have feather, flow, and density all at 100. You notice I'm staying away from the edges again. All right, so I want her sharp in there. I want, probably in here, I think could be sharp. Add some sharpness there. I might come in and erase that if I feel it doesn't need it. I want her ear sharp too. I think her ear's kind of interesting. All right, so we'll do that. Now what I'll do is I'll come in and turn auto mask back on. And I'll come towards this edge. And again, I want to keep that plus sign away from the background. I just want to stay on her face. All right. And I'll come down in here maybe. Don't really need it down there, but let's see. So I'm going to turn the overlay off. I'm going to hit the O key and turn it off. Okay, that's probably a little too sharp, but I'm going to leave it that way for a minute so you could see there's before and there's after. All right, so that's sharpening and noise reduction added to this image. There's before and there's after. What I'll probably do is maybe just tweak that down just a little bit. And again, if you feel that isn't sharp enough, you could duplicate that as well. Just right click on the little button and click duplicate, but I'm not going to here. I don't think it's needed. So really that is how I sharpen and reduce noise in an image, really with the brush, very specific parts. And just to finish it off, I'm going to do one more just real quick to show you my actual workflow. This image here, again, was shot with the Nikon D500, and this is at an ISO of 6400. So there's considerably more noise here. And again, I would zoom in. So I'm going to close the brush for a second and zoom in and look. And there is color noise, a lot of color noise on this one. So I would take this color slider, and again, I've found between 15 and 25. Really get rid of color. Now, it actually removed the color everywhere, but right in here, there's a tiny bit, right? Just a tiny bit. So I'm going to tweak it up to 25, and it's gone. Pretty much, a tiny bit maybe, but I think that's good. So that's the only global adjustment I'm going to do, but you could still see there's quite a bit of noise. So I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to go to my brush. I'm going to reset the sliders by double clicking. I'm going to go to the noise slider and put it up at 100. I'm going to turn auto mask off. I'm going to get a large brush and I'm going to just paint. I'm going to turn the overlay on by hitting the O key, and I'm going to paint. Stay away from the gorilla and paint. All right. Then I'm going to turn auto mask on and get a smaller brush and come in here and get the edges. Make sure that plus sign does not touch the gorilla. All right. I think I missed a spot right here. And maybe here, and I probably missed more, but for the sake of this video, I think you guys understand it. Maybe in here. Sometimes when auto mask is on too, it will miss spots, and you'll have to go over it a few times, as you can see here. Let me turn auto mask back off and kind of get it better in there, because those dark areas are definitely the harborer of noise. It's going to hold more noise in those dark areas. So you want to make sure you get those really the darkest areas as effectively as you can when you reduce noise. Now, I'm going to turn the overlay off, hit the O key. I'm going to zoom in by holding in the space bar. I'm going to look at it, let it render. It takes a second. It softened it greatly. All right, there's before and there's after. And if I feel that it didn't soften it good enough, I could go to this button, right click on it and duplicate it. Okay. Zoom in again, hold the space bar in. There's before. And there after. So it really reduced a ton of noise, right? I think that's good. And you got to remember too, the person that took the picture is the only one that really is going to zoom in and look at the noise, look for the noise. Generally speaking, everyone else that's going to look at the image, they're just going to notice if the noise is really crazy bad or if the sharpening is over sharpened. Other than that, they tend to not notice that. This is good enough, and you can see it's really blurry. Now again, I could have used the global adjustments in the detail tab, and I could have used the masking slider to mask some of that background, but I've also have less control of where I'm sharpening. It's still sharpening pretty much everywhere else on the gorilla. Maybe I don't want to do that. I just want to sharpen her face. So I'm going to get a new brush, and I'm going to reset everything by double clicking on the word effect. I'm going to go to sharpness, and I'm going to temporarily turn that all the way up. And I just really want to do her face in here. So I'll turn the overlay on by hitting the O key. And I have auto mask off for now. I don't think I need to turn it on for this one. Straightforward. Kind of like that. Just like that. Maybe I'll do her ear too over here. Like this. All right, I'll turn the overlay off. I'll hit the O key again. And we'll do a before after. There's before. And there's after. And that's it. That's really all you need to do. And that's the way I do it. That's the way a lot of photographers do it. And a lot of top photographers that are a bazillion times better than me. That's the way they do it. They don't worry about the noise that's on her face because most people aren't going to notice it because there's so much detail there. So they're not really noticing the noise. So, and it's not as noticeable, really. The noise isn't as noticeable. It's more noticeable in these more homogenous areas of the background where it's blurry and out of focus. So that's how I go about doing it. Hopefully this helps you better sharpen and reduce noise in your images and make them a little more interesting. Make people notice the gorilla's face a little more readily because that's the sharpest part of the image. Everything else is not as sharp.